Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook talks about Tetris, the game, Tetris, the movie starring Taron Egerton or Edgerton. Uh, sorry. Tetris, Cold Wars, and warm friendships, and what it was like working under Hank Rogers prior to Silver Spook Games. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that eventually. Um, but yeah, so if you haven't heard of it, Tetris is a movie that has recently been released on Apple Movies. It is we just got to watch that the other night, last night. So, um, it's a fun movie. I recommend checking it out. It's it's just a interesting movie on in its own right. Just Tetris is, I grew up as a gamer. I grew up playing games from the age of like 4 or 5. I got my first Nintendo. Nintendo was my first system, which is where Hank Rogers, that's the character who Egerton is playing, who is the Tetris guy. He's the guy who um, got helped bring Tetris to the world. Let's say he did not the actual producer of it, although he did contribute some to it. Alexei Pajitnov was the original creator. But anyways, so Tetris is a game that I've played since I was a little kid. I'm a 40-year-old millennial, so it was I was raised on Tetris and Mario. So this is all very nostalgic for 80s children, 80s game players. But also I have a lot of other personal connections to Hank Rogers. As I alluded to, I literally have worked, not directly, I wasn't like his personal assistant or a programmer right under him. But Hank Rogers is somebody who has lived in Hawaii for a long time. He has close connections in Hawaii. He went to University of Hawaii, which I also did. So we actually have the same alma mater in that sense. He is also a giant nerd. He's also a giant game nerd. He's Dutch, but also he's Dutch Indonesian. So we also share at least some amount of Austronesian Pacific Islander ancestry in some senses. But he also does he's been a important person and figure in Hawaii for a long time, and he's a very international person. And so am I. So we have a lot in common in that sense. But I also did directly work for him, I did work under him. Within he has many let's say organizations, enterprises that he has set up over the years and decades. And he is a force. He is a force, like, in general. Globally, this is part of what this movie is about. He has a bushy-eyed bushy-tailed bunny-eyed energy. He just goes and gets it, in a kind of like less in the better sense of Americanness. That's one of the lines is, I couldn't say no. Have you ever tried saying no to an American? That's like one of Alexei, the Russian programmer of Tetris, says that when Hank the American shows up and just wants to be his friend, he keeps wanting to be his friend. It could be its own bromance in that sense. But anyways, so sorry, I'm kind of spiraling in all directions at once. But the Tetris and Hank himself has been actually literally a presence in my life in some sense for most of my adult working life, basically. And certainly I grew up playing Tetris, so it's really my entire life is somehow connected to Tetris and this guy in particular. Not necessarily like him, but like the things that he has helped to produce, including like Neofeud. We'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's very hard to, as I said, it's kind of difficult to disentangle. It's very difficult to unpuzzle the puzzle blocks of my life that are kind of wrapped up in Tetris, including Silver Spook Games itself. Like Silver Spook Games might not exist without at least some help from Hank's organizations. So I'm gonna try to stick to the plot here because I gotta get out. We're gonna talk to some other game developers, indigenous game developers panel. We're gonna have that in about a couple hours. So I gotta stick to the story. Well, let's just go over what is Tetris, right? I mean, because anybody you want to know what Tetris is, just watch the trailer. You can always just check out the Apple TV site, right? But I want to give you more inside scoop on this, because this is a particular game that I'm a game and a topic that I'm very close to in a lot of ways. Oop, shit. Sorry, I'm just trying to make this quieter. There you go. Yeah. So, anyways, so Tetris is a game that tells an unbelievable story of one of the world's most popular video games found its way to avid players around the globe. Hank Rogers, played by Taron Egerton, discovers Tetris in 1988, and then risks everything by traveling to the Soviet Union, where he joins forces with inventor Alexei Pajitnov, played by Nikita Efremov, to bring the game to the masses. Based on a true story, Tetris is a Cold War era thriller on steroids, with double-crossing villains, unlikely heroes, and a nail-biting race to the finish. And that's accurate. That is an accurate description of this movie. Oh my god, where do I even go with this? It's like, well, one thing I want to, maybe I'll just, I don't know how to talk about it. All of the movies that I've talked about, it's like, I'm kind of like, this is what I think about the movie. But with Hank, I literally have heard him tell this story. Like, let me see if I can find a specific thing. Like when I was at the University of Hawaii, Hank showed up to my classroom and told that story. You know what I'm saying? The Tetris guy. Not at South by Southwest, but he showed up looking like this, right? He often would show up like I remember he showed up like in a t-shirt and flip flops. That was in Hawaii. This is South by Southwest, so he's a little bit of doing a catwalk thing, which if you know me, sometimes I do that. But Hank showed up like in like a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt, flip flops to my university class. This is usually in Hawaii. This is what he looks like, most of the time. And he gave like a talk to I was at the University of Hawaii in games programming. I was doing practicums with the Academy for Creative Media, which is it was a new institute that was set up to kind of like foster more innovation, more movies, more film, make writers and producers and game programmers and game designers, and to get more innovative energy going in Hawaii. I mean, this is a thing that I've been always wishing for my whole life, that there would be more outside of just the tourism industry and the military, there would be more creative, productive, just a bigger diversity and more creative and productive energy and industries in Hawaii. Like I was in college in the noughties, and I remember like Hank would show up like this, and he'd just be like, "Hey everybody, I'm that guy that owns Tetris. I made Tetris. I went to the Soviet Union. I did my spy thriller thing that you can watch on Apple TV." He tells it like a Cold War story. It is like a Cold War story. I remember he's in the film, right? It's very much John le Carré up. It's dramatized. He gets interrogated. It's all like he could be killed at any time. It's like a James Bond thriller. It's like From Russia with Love. He looks a little bit like Sean Connery. He's like Sean Connery, slightly less Scottish. Slightly less Scottish. A little more Indonesian. And Dutch. But he's but in the actual way we would tell it when he would come to when he came to my classroom when I was working on I was actually being taught by the one of the lead programmers on Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. I don't know if you remember that, but that was produced in Hawaii, right? I don't know. The movie didn't do very well, kind of like one of Hank's first endeavors. So when he's in the beginning of the movie, Hank is trying to borrow $3 million from a guy. After Hank has just spent millions of dollars on something else, and he's like, "Can I have some more, buddy?" But Final Fantasy was one of these things that it was actually produced in Hawaii. I don't know if you remember this. Everybody knows Final Fantasy 14 now, but for the 20 years olds and the 15-year-olds who are not eldritch millennials like myself, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within was a movie that was produced in Hawaii, and I think Hank was at least somewhere involved because he was very close to Nintendo, right? And this was produced in Hawaii, at a custom render farm created by Square in Hawaii. It housed 960 Pentium 3s. Anyways, so the guy who worked on Final Fantasy: Spirits Within, who was actually he was an East Indian. Indian from the country of India, who was raised in Canada, and then he was working for the Japanese, U.S. but Hawaii-based Square facility on Final Fantasy Within. And then after the Final Fantasy Within, he was teaching at the University of Hawaii. So I was actually taking classes from the Final Fantasy, one of the head Square people, and then Hank showed up to that classroom, and he's all like, so I mean, talking about like the internationality. Because this is a movie about it. It's about like one of the themes of Tetris is that like let me just play a very short clip from did I lose it? I had a short video open here. Let me just play this very short clip here. This is Hank's interview. I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but
what I hope people will take away from this is that friendship trumps ideology and countries. So our friendship, basically countries can fall and rise and all kinds of things, and we are still friends.
And that's Sergey. Sergey is Alexei Pajitnov. That is the creator of the original program of Tetris from the Soviet Union during the Soviet period of Russia. Right before the collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, was when Hank went to Russia and then retreated. But anyways, so like so let me try to stay on one topic. So but the actual getting of the Tetris game, right, was an international process. The bringing of Tetris to the world was an international endeavor. As it comes up in the movie, Hank himself is he has a he has an American accent, Dutch passport, went to the University of Hawaii. He met his wife in the University of Hawaii. His wife is a Japanese woman that he moved to Japan and worked in the very nascent brand new game industry, software industry. There wasn't really a very big game industry at the time. And so his character, when he showed up in Russia, they were like, wait, you're Dutch, you're American, you're Japanese, you have a Japanese wife, you live in Japan, you spend a lot of time in Hawaii. So it was confusing for a lot of people. But it is kind of confusing for a lot of people sometimes when, I mean, like, in Hawaii, it is a very international place for a lot of reasons. I'm a native Hawaiian, but I'm also a lot of things. Like, my family is, we have background that is American or from people, white guys from America, as well as native Hawaiian. I'm Japanese ancestry, lots of other ancestry, and Hawaii is a place where that's part of the history is being a place that connected people around the world, and that kind of coming back to the topic of Cold Wars and warm friendships. And so Hank's, like, as he said in that, you can watch the rest of that clip if you want to. Also, I just want to say that Hank is actually he's a lot darker skinned than Taran, actually. And part of that he's in the sun a lot because he is a beach guy. He actually goes on the hokulea, the sailing, the Polynesian voyaging canoe, or the Pacific indigenous people voyaging canoe that has been traveling the world and has actually circumnavigated the globe multiple times to prove that native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders were capable of that. So Hank has actually participated in that. Like he's actually been involved in a lot of things, like in Hawaii, including like environmental initiatives. He started an entire multi-$100 million foundation that's just dedicated to trying to bring green energy and renewable energy and deal with climate change. I mean, literally, the reason why there are subsidies for 50% of solar, and the solar penetration in Hawaii is like 50+%, and it led the United States, is in part because Hank said, I want to do that. I want to engage in that, and I remember because he would talk about that as well, and also, as I said, I worked under him. I never never was directly his employee, but I was in organizations that he operated or was at the helm of or founded, right? Like Blue Planet is one of them. That was an environmental organization. There was Blue Lava Wireless was another in the noughties when cell phone games were taking off. He's always at the cutting edge of these things as well. When cell phone games were taking off, kind of like Tetris was when video games period were taking off in the 80s, right? Game Boy wasn't even launched yet. And then he got to see the first Game Boy. That's part of the movie Tetris, is you see Hank going to Seattle, Washington, and then seeing it's an international team. There's Japanese, and then there's white Americans working on the new Game Boy system. And Hank gets to try the first one, and then he loads up Tetris up, and it's like, check this out. And Tetris on the Game Boy was one of the most successful Tetris period. I think it's possibly the most sold game of all time. Tetris is in the top 3. So Minecraft has recently surpassed. Wait, no, it's not Minecraft. No, Tetris are the only other known video games to have sold over 100 million copies. Where is it? Best-selling video games. Oh, 738 million? Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find the wait, no. No, but Tetris as a whole, I believe, is the highest selling game of all time. If you like add up all the copies it has ever historically sold, I mean, as a single a game on a single platform, I think it might be, or a single game release, it might be Minecraft. But Tetris, because you have the original 1980s Nintendo version, you have the PC version, and the arcade version, all of which they're constantly fighting over. A lot of Tetris is about the struggle over the intellectual property of Tetris and the rights to produce it on arcade console, on arcade machine, on console, on the PC computer platform, and on video game. Video game meaning it means what consoles mean now, right? And so that's a lot of the nitty gritty of the back and forth trying to get those rights. But Tetris it's basically the most, if I'm not mistaken, it's the most played game of all time. I think Grand Theft Auto and Minecraft are right behind it. But if you add up all the... Anyway. So, long story short. So, a lot of the story is about the international connections. And as Hank said, that survive, the bureaucracies and the and the greed and the machinations of countries and of self-interested individuals under a capitalist sense, and the corporate inhumanity, let's call it. So I think it's interesting to see Tetris, especially from the present, right? Where there's a lot of hostility. I mean, let's put it. It's kind of like jumping to 2023. There's a lot of hostility between, again, right? Unfortunately, the U.S. and Russia. I mean, putting it very lightly, which there doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be that. There is that, right? Because of forces of history and geopolitics, etc. But, there could be more friendships, right? and people working together to produce things. And I think that's another reason why like this movie is like, it's still produced in the West, so it's got some it's got some of your usual ways of depicting Russia and the Soviet Union, but if you kind of like, especially if you're from that side, you might take a little bit of, well, it's not painting all of the West in the most beautiful light. The Maxwells, who are very, very, very shady, very not nice British billionaire run moguls, that are just shredding all of, they're like stealing millions and millions from people's pension funds. They're like embezzling all this money. Daddy Maxwell, let me see, Maxwell from Tetris, they kind of represent the imperialist, they're kind of the old London imperialist British capitalist, the worst parts of Western imperial capitalism. The Maxwells in Tetris. Let me see I'm just gonna get the picture. Yeah, this guy, the man who lost Tetris. His character is running this huge organization. He's like, I'm friends with Mikhail Gorbachev. I can do whatever I want. I will get the rights. And he's talking about, when he goes to Russia, he's offering Russia like pennies or $25,000 or 50 or basically almost nothing. He's like, here, you can have some Encyclopedia Britannica publishing rights, and you give me Tetris, and he's somebody who inside of the UK where he's from, he's a British businessman, right? Banker, or I forget his title, but he's a wealthy British titan, and he's like stealing all their money, right? Which is these people, right? The people that took half of your 401k or your parents' 401k in 0809, right? Savings and loan crisis, .com crisis, Silicon Valley Bank today. I mean, I've talked about this on multiple streams. I have a whole stream just recently about Silicon Valley Bank. So those kind of like the worst aspects of Western capitalist imperialism are represented, and they're not in a good light. So, and he goes to Russia, and he's friends with Mikhail Gorbachev, the head of Russia at the time in the Soviet Union, but he's not really helping Russia. He's doing economic warfare. I will give you far less than what you owe. I am going to lie and kind of cheat and swindle you, which is what he's doing, right? He's like, he doesn't tell the Russians, hey, there's actually these things called royalties that they didn't. I remember when Hank tells the story, he's like, Hank Rogers. Well, let me talk about that specific part of the movie. That's a good place to start. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place because it's like, I'm very excited about this because of reasons. So, when Hank showed up in Moscow, let me see if I can get that. Tetris, Moscow. Did Russian mob kill games developers? What? Daily Mail, stop talking. Tetris Moscow scene. I'm trying to get the scene with the Russians. Yeah, here's him and Alexei driving in Russia. Of course, a lot of this is not exactly, a lot of it is embellished, for the movie's purposes. But anyways, okay, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Let me just put this up on screen. So when Hank goes to Russia, it's a long. I don't want to tell you the entire interweaving. So basically, like, there are multiple entities. There are the Maxwells. There are they're British, and they're very wealthy, old money. And then they have another, Stein is another person who is specifically flying into Russia, speaks Russian to kind of negotiate to acquire rights to property in Russia, like software, like Tetris is one of them, that they can then sell around the world. And so and Hank gets into a position where he has to, he's low on money. He's running out of money. His family could lose the house if they don't make some money very quickly. And also, he really believes in Tetris. Like, he actually worked on Go. So Hank originally is a programmer. He programmed. He worked on a version of Go, right? The Chinese board game of Go, that was playable on a computer. Now, I mean, just again for the context, there was no such. This is when like Pong was still new. You know, like Space Invaders era. So this is like way back in the day. So the concept of video games was still new to the world, right? It was really a burgeoning industry. So he was working on Go. He was working on more game properties to sell. In the beginning of the movie, he's actually like in a conference, a game conference. Was it electronics conference, consumer electronics conference? Somewhere, I think, was it in Vegas? And showing off one of the new games for the new systems, trying to get people to pick it up and play it. And he discovers Tetris there, right? From another guy who's checking this out. It's Tetris. And so he falls in love with it. He plays it for a few minutes, and he's like, all night, all I see is, is falling blocks in front of my eyes, even in my sleep, right? I dream in Tetris puzzles now. And he goes and he finds out more about this Tetris thing. And he like basically like becomes a diehard believer. He's like, I gotta go to Moscow. I gotta figure out how can I get this Tetris and bring it to the world, because he wants to and he also is working with Nintendo's head at the time. Yeah. So Hank is somebody who is close to Hiroshi Yamauchi, a Japanese businessman, and the third president of Nintendo. And so, if you know Nintendo, right? But Nintendo was, even in that time when Tetris was coming out in the 80s, the major world player, certainly from the Japanese side. Like, everyone knew who Nintendo was if you're in the game business, right? And so it was, and still everybody knows who Nintendo was. And so Hank was, and the way it's put in the movie is that Hank, unlike a lot of other people who were working for Hiroshi Yamauchi, Hank was an outsider. And so a lot of people inside the company were like, not to say like feudal serfs, but they were like very much respectful. They didn't want to like speak too directly because of, cultural realities in Japan, as well as, some would describe him as ruling with an iron fist. And Nintendo has certain reputations. I actually know people who work for Nintendo in Hawaii, because Nintendo, Konami, they actually had. When I went to college, I actually was in college with people who were working at or recently worked at Konami and/or Nintendo. So the Hawaii-Japan connections are very close as well, which is why it's part of why Hank lives in Japan. Anyway, as I said, this is all like tied up in my own history, so. Trying to keep things straight. So Hiroshi's, but Hank gave where a lot of people were afraid to speak freely with the head of Nintendo, right, for fear of disrespecting him or maybe they might get fired. Hank was like an outsider. He's a Dutch American guy married to a Japanese woman, and Hank's personality, like I'm not like good friends with him, but like I know his personality. I've seen him at so many events. As I said, I've been in the room like when he's giving talks multiple times in my professional life and in the university. And he's like, he is very, like in the movie, he's almost like unhinged levels of pushy. he is very, he really does shoot for the moon. Let's just put it that way. I'm trying to be like nice about this, as much as possible. I'm not to say, because I think, he is like, I think he's genuinely is like a nice guy. I mean, obviously there's problems with empire and there's problems with certain economic systems, but like I really do think that he genuinely, while he is a businessman, he like does try to be upfront and honest with everybody, because he's also, I think even before he was a businessman, he was a game programmer. Like he worked on games, like he was both a Wozniak and a Jobsian figure, at different times. And mostly he was like making the games first, and then he kind of fell into, well, I gotta figure out how to make some money from this. And I know how that is, because at Silver Spoon Games, I mean, yes, like we're trying to promote, better economic and political structures around the world, but also, as was also described recently by the Chinese. Speaking of communist parties, because the Russian Communist Party, Russian communist entities are brought up, but the Chinese have learned that lesson, which is that you can't sacrifice production and economic realities for ideology, right? That's something that the Chinese took from the fall of the Soviet Union. And so anyway, so long story short, it's that's like, this movie is actually like, this is like brings up so much, because this is like so close to home in reality, and also like recontextualizes my history in a lot of ways. And anyway, so the Japanese reality, we're coming back to that, maybe I can dovetail into that. The Japanese reality is one of the history of Japan, right? In which they have their own, and I'm also part Japanese as well, by the way. So they have, in some senses, very rigid structures, right? Where, like they have corporations, they have companies like Nintendo, and they have a very specific way. You look at the way that they produce, it is sometimes very efficient. Like Toyota, like there are 40-year-old Toyotas. That's the only thing I will want to drive. It's Toyota or some Japanese car, like a Nissan, a Toyota, some Hondas, but everything else is not functioning now 40 years later. Teslas break 5 minutes off the lot, but the 80s, 90s Toyotas, they lasted forever. You know what I'm saying? And so, and the Japanese games, they were just very good at the things that they were doing, but they had like their own like kind of structure and rigid way that kind of comes from feudal Japan, and historic Japanese culture. The just-in-time production, the kind of like the system of, they have sometimes maybe too extreme company loyalty, to the point of like even like shaming people. They had like 6-7 day work weeks that they pioneered, which is possibly not the best. But anyways, one of the aspects of the Japanese work culture that was in Nintendo was that a lot of people inside the company didn't want to like basically, do a faux pas with the shogun in one sense, or just like they didn't want to disrespect the boss, the head of the company. And Hank, saw him as Hank. I think he said that he saw Hiroshi just as an equal, because Hank doesn't have any qualms about walking in and talking to anybody that he so feels like. Everyone is a potential friend of Hank's. He is like that though. I've seen him like he'll like walk up to the governor and anyone in the mayor, and also he'll just come into the, like I said, like he'll just walk into the university, right? I almost want to say like part of that is Hank's, Hank's Hawaiianness and possibly Indonesianness, because everyone is your kind of your potential friend. Even the kids in the university, like he would come in and he was like eagerly answering all the questions, like, oh yeah, you guys are really excited about Dungeons and Dragons. When I was at University of Hawaii, like, there's a joke in one of the interviews, I think it was a New York Times, one of the articles about the Tetris movie, and they said Hank Rogers, the founder of all of these companies and the guy who brought Tetris to the world, etc. Hank Rogers went to the University of Hawaii. He majored in computer science and he minored in Dungeons and Dragons. That is literally the case. That's not even a joke. I mean, obviously you can't minor in Dungeons and Dragons, but he spent a lot of time playing games. This guy is absolutely a gaming nerd. So I could tell, so when he came to the classroom, when I was taking games design program, I was doing practicums. We were working on the a unreleased version of the Crysis 2 engine projects. Like that was one of the really cool things that like this is part of like, it's literally like when I was learning how to make games, part of it was at the University of Hawaii, and in Hawaii in the incubators, and like Hank like actually funded and pushed a lot of that to get people excited and innovating. And that was like one of the things that it was like I felt like Hawaii really needed, because there, unfortunately it's kind of like in the movie where you have very wealthy, very powerful, entrenched private interests and government interests, and a lot of those they overlap and interweave, and it's so, it's often very incestually. Like you have the billionaire guy with his son, Maxwell Senior and Maxwell Junior in the movie, right? Maxwell Senior is introducing his son as Kevin, and Kevin's like, "No, I'm a grown man. You're a son of a billionaire. You're like an emerald apartheid baby." No. But he was. And so there's all of this like greedy, old entrenched oligarchic interests in a variety of contexts, and then people just trying to like produce games or whatever products or create new technologies, right? And so games are new technology, and they're also entertainment, and they're also fun. They're like, I think Alexei Pajitnov described it as like, I was meant to design tools to create tools to create tools to create tools for a business to design more tools as a Russian programmer, and that's fine. But like Tetris was a thing. Tetris is where because software, computer programming, that's a lot of what it does, right? Computer software manages the systems that guide trains, right? If they're working properly, unlike the United States, but that manage weather trackers and health and everything else, right? And then so they're tools that help and guide, and like artificial intelligence is a tool that is used to help maneuver other tools, right? And so, but games is one place where the programming and the software, right, the tools that you're programming literally bring joy and pleasure to you straight through your screen, right? They bring happiness from the screen, right, to you. So rather than the software being a tool to help other tools, to help other tools, to help other tools, right? So that's one unique thing about the game industry, is a place where some people that are at like the highest levels of science and technology, etc., can like create something that comes straight to you. And so that's a unique phenomenon that was evolving in the 80s, all right? And hey, what's up, Victor? Victor is another software designer who has worked on games before. And so that's like a very important point, which is that, and that's another theme of Tetris, as Hank Rogers and Alexei Pajitnov speak about in this interview. That's not an interview. In this interview, or not in that interview, not in that interview. I keep losing all of my files. No, that's not it. Why do I keep losing it? Okay, so I'm like losing my train of thought. But anyway, so Hank and Alexei kind of like talk about how the game culture and the game industry. I think Alexei's point was that the game culture and the game industry, the game universe, right, that now is everywhere, right? What he wanted was to make the point that, like, unlike the countries and these the bureaucracies and the corporations and the governments of Russia and the United States and the rest of the planet, right? The game culture was a new culture, right, that was emerging, that was about a lot of it is about building interactivity and friendships, and it's about bringing joy, and it is about working, because you have to program and design these games, which it does take time and energy, but there is a joy to working on code, right, working and producing, and it can be painstaking. Sometimes you stay up late at night. I mean, not ideally, crunch is not necessarily it's not a good thing. And maybe you get more sleep. If you stay up to 3:30, you're entering more bugs than code, right, at that point. But there is like a joy to creating or crafting a piece of software that works, and it will work. If you create a software with the nature of the Turing machines, right, or the computer, the binary code and the software, the nature of software is such that if you create a piece of code that functions on one computer, it can be transmitted almost instantaneously to virtually any other machine on the planet, especially with the internet. I was a little slower with the floppy disk back then, but still within 12 hours of red eyes, you could get a Tetris from Japan to the United States to London to Moscow, and everyone could have it. And they're flying all the time because they're doing the deals between. It's a very Cold War John le Carre spy thriller, but with gaming characteristics, and they're flying all around the world, right? But with software, you can instantaneously share what you've created with everyone, and they can play it and take pleasure from it, enjoy it, and you can get that feedback that you've done something that's worth other people, that other people find of value in a way that it's a very unique sort of industry. Now, obviously, there's problems with the game industry since that point, and other software has had problems since that point, but it's kind of like it's the game industry and games themselves is kind of like the modern geopolitical reality, which is that like it is possible that the United States, Russia, right, and the United States and other countries, right, could work together in a Hank Rogers idealistic way. I mean, I don't want to say idealistic. They could work together in a better present and a better future, right, than they are now, right? And part of the reason why that they're not working that way is because of all of the entrenched interests, in the same way that they were in the 1980s, right? So if the United States would like to stop, sending weapons everywhere again, right? Because it's a Cold War. There's an industrial espionage element, right? There's the getting the IP. There's the war between corporations, right? Because you have Nintendo, you have the Maxwells, and they're all kind of vying for the game. And it's one thing to have friendly competition, like I used to teach robotics. I used to teach Lego robotics. I used to teach STEM as a job in Oahu, Hawaii, right? I've actually taught it at the University of Hawaii. I've taught it all around where Hank Rogers also went to school. And you teach, in the Lego Robotics League, you teach they have the things like cooperation, but the main idea is that like everyone is here to learn and to have a good time and also to benefit, while we're also competing, because we're also like trying to produce a robot that's capable of, with the ultrasonic sensors and heat and light and sound sensors, and C# or C++. They're like, what is it coded in? Pascal, C? And it's like, kids are learning programming, kids are learning how robotic, actuators and sensors integrate and designing a, simple level of artificial intelligence. And the different schools, some you have more well-off schools, like the $20,000 a year private Ivy League feeder schools, and then you have like the other less well-resourced schools, unfortunately. But like in the Lego competition, it's a lot like the Tetris mindset. It's a lot like the Hank Rogers mindset, which is like we're trying to cooperate and learn, and the competition is like, if somebody loses the Lego competition, it's not the end of the world. And other teams actually in the Lego competition, teams that are not doing very well or have a hard time, the teams that have very well resourced students, right? Like you have millionaire kids. I mean, literally the CEO of eBay's kids go to one of these schools, and at the other one is like kids from my neighborhood, which is a very impoverished, literally the most impoverished neighborhood in the United States, like statistically. And so the Lego League's robotics rules is that like all teams help each other. So you don't mock and laugh at and try to undercut, right, and lie and definitely don't cheat and all these things. But you also don't like insult and put down the teams that are not doing as well. All the teams are there to learn and to do better, right? Working together. They're competing, but still like teams. And actually, if there's teams that like have all the resources, they have like literal rocket science parents. They have children who have all the money, all the resources. They have private tutors, right? They're from like a fancy, like I said, $30,000 a year school. They got the best coaches. They got the best tutors. If those students like don't help the less resourced, public school, come at-risk, underserved communities. This is where I worked with mostly. If the better served communities, well-off students don't help the less well-off, they will be docked in points in the competition to kind of like reinforce the fact that like we're not here we're all humans at the end. We're not here to like literally conquer each other. We're not here to like subjugate, or one might say colonize, right? Or one might say have predatory capitalistic exploitation of other teams, right? So, and so like and so that the vibe of the later competition is a lot like, what is kind of being the vibe of the movie Tetris, right? Which is Hank wants to be everybody's friend. Which is kind of that's just how he is, that's just I swear that's just how he is, I'm not trying to stand a multi-hundred millionaire, but I mean that is how he is. I mean, to be 100% like, and to slightly dovetail into Neofeud, like literally my game, right? Neofeud, which is, it's a dystopian science fictional adventure game. It's also on sale right now, so don't forget that if you like dystopian cyberpunk science fiction adventure games that are also satirical and comedic, this game is on sale right now yet again. So now is the perfect time to support Silver Spook Games, speaking of gaming, by picking this up. And so, but Neofeud, when I created Neofeud, where was I going with that? Yeah, so like Neofeud, the game itself, wouldn't exist in one sense, as I alluded to, without Hank, because, and not without him, he didn't specifically like give me my programming, my writing, my music, and my art skills, because I basically produced this game as a one-person indie dev, right? He didn't like give me all the skills, but the space in which I was innovating Neofeud, I like literally spent a lot of time at the Manoa Innovation Center. Let me see if they still exist. The Manoa Innovation Center. Yeah, so they're still there. So the Manoa Innovation Center, located near University of Hawaii at Manoa, or the MIC, that's what we always call the MIC, brings together the best of Hawaii's intellectual and physical resources. MIC serves as an incubation space for new and early stage technology companies. So actually, I worked at multiple companies in the Manoa Innovation Center. Like one of them was a ex Microsoft vice president of, I think it was the Internet Explorer division, but it was basically a very high level. He retired at like 37 with all the money he would ever need, right? So he retired from the West Coast of the United States from Microsoft, and then moved, and he started like, a new incubator company, right? For early stage technology. I mean, he was starting it was at the time cell phone games were new, and so he was like working on cell phone games. So I was working at that company after getting actually spent a lot of time kind of half in and out of college, kind of a little bit Bill Gatesian, I suppose, like that. But when I was working in the beginning in the software industry, I was working out of this space, right? And so and the Manoa Innovation Center, if I'm not mistaken, let me just double check. And so yeah, so Hank Rogers was instrumental in the founding of, so this is from Blue Lava Wireless. So that was the cell phone games and cell phone technology innovation that Hank was working on at the Manoa Innovation Center. And he was one of the people that was instrumental in getting that whole thing set up, right? A lot of it was basically his idea, because he's like, we need more innovation coming out of Hawaii so that we have people that are graduating from college, they have somewhere to go if they don't want to just work in the tourism industry or finance and real estate. It's kind of like what the Maxwells are doing, which is like making more money, having more money, rent seeking, and then kind of screwing over a lot of people, like jacking up the prices of rents, shredding people's pensions, right? Taking billions of dollars and making hyper risky and often fraudulent loans, etc. Like I've talked about that all the time. I almost worked for Goldman Sachs, like I said, and I'm glad I didn't. And so the Manoa Innovation Center was a place that let's try to get other industries going, right? So that Hawaii has more diversity of production, right, and more diversity of economic activity to support people's livelihoods and jobs and be a participant in the global economy outside of just tourism, finance, and military, industrial complex. So The Manoa Innovation Center brings together best. Yeah, and so Neofeud, I actually programmed. I remember specifically, I was at the Manoa Innovation Center, and I remember like sitting there, listening to a talk from a Hawaiian, Chinese, Japanese kid who went to from Hawaii, and then he went to Los Angeles. Was a 3D concept a concept artist and 3D artist. He worked on Thor, the movie Thor. He worked on Iron Man. He worked on like major movies in the Los Angeles, in Hollywood, right, as a production designer. And then he moved back to Hawaii, and he was like, I was kind of tired of LA, for a lot of reasons. The air, some of the people, I not getting along with them that well, and I wanted to come back to Hawaii. And I remember he was like talking about like what it takes to get into the industry at the Manoa Innovation Center, as like one, like encouraging more people to get involved in other things they could get involved in, like art and production. And they're trying to launch more like not like Hawaii Hollywood, like like Bollywood, but like imagine Hawaii already starts with an H, so I can't call it Hollywood. But it's like a Hawaii based film and TV economy is what they were trying to launch at this time. And so I remember he was talking about like all these things, and I was painting. I even remember the specific character. I was painting. I was specifically painting this character from Neofeud in that office. I mean, in that office space. And actually, I worked on Neofeud. Some of it I worked on at home and at other places. At the Starbucks, I actually released Neofeud from a Starbucks in Hilo, Hawaii. But a lot of it was produced, and a lot of the energy to keep working on Neofeud, because making games. I know Victor knows, right? But making games can be often a very grueling. It can be a very grueling and difficult and trying endeavor that takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, like I brought up, because I did all the aspects of, basically all of the aspects of Neofeud I did myself. And so the camaraderie that you get when you're talking to other game developers and going like, hey, we're all working on games together. Where are you at? And then you're like, every week, I would like show bits of Neofeud, and other people show, oh, I'm working on this game. Here's where we are. I'd be like, here's the new character and background art that I worked on. Here's the new castle. And everybody's like, well, that's cool. And so like, the fellow, the camaraderie between fellow game developers, right, that was engendered at that center, which was started, and a lot of it was pushed by Hank, is at least in part to thank for this entire game, because I might not have kept going on it if I didn't have some amount of community there. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to reconnect to this. So yeah, give me 1 second. Yeah, so I think in that sense, I owe something to at least I don't owe Hank money, but don't get in debt. Like Hank starts out at the beginning of the movie. That's the part they're definitely like pulling at your millennial student debt heartstrings. Hank owes a lot of money to people, and he's like, I need some more money so I can pay you the money back, and I don't want to lose my house. Like literally like the farm, and so but it's like without the spirit of like friendship and the spirit of we're working together on something, it can be difficult to keep going on things. That's one thing that a lot of the game industry has lost. I look at the game industry, I look at the way that obviously the gaming community has changed over the last 40 years, to the extent that it has a community. A lot of it is, I talk about that a lot, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because I've been down that rabbit hole many times on these streams. But you know what I'm talking about, the toxic aspects of modern gaming culture, the Maxwell money grub, let me see if I can find that one. The Maxwell money grubbing types have deeply entrenched themselves in the game industry, unfortunately, right? And that have smothered out a lot of the energy of like, we just want to make things and produce things that people enjoy and bring and want to play, right? And a lot of that just gets crushed by, well, I want to make trillions of dollars sticking in needless, microtransactions and hyper addictive algorithms that don't make the game any more fun, but make me a lot more money. I just want to fire everyone. And actually, in the way that like game companies, just mass fire all their workers without warning, right? Cut all their severance packages and screw them over for, one or a handful of, rich dudes usually, profits, right? The CEO. That happens in this movie where you see like lots of people are getting screwed over by this guy in particular. In Russia, there's a guy who is working for the government, but he's also like selling out his own country so that he can make millions for himself. So that you kind of see that like happening on multiple sides, right? And which is that, that's something that happens in governments, in places of power, whether those are governmental, whether those are corporate, private or private or public, which a lot of that is post 1700s Western recontextualization of the world that is a little bit fraudulent, but you know what I'm saying? So a lot of the problems with the gaming culture have to do with people like that kind of taking over the reins of things, and it's really like it's an interplay, because people need to do, people need to produce, and people have to handle business. Unfortunately, it's kind of like, it would be great, like in the part when you're in Russia, they have, it has a lot of the sad gray bleak filter that's, it's like some of it reminds of Stranger Things season 3 in Tetris in the less good way when they're there. Let me see if I can find that Tetris in Moscow. Some of it reminds me of Tetris movie. If I find the name of the actor, that's probably what I should do. So Nikita Efremov, Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev is not. I don't think he's actually in the movie, but it's a guy who plays. Let me see. Yeah. So because I get a picture of him, then I can get the Russia. I'm having trouble finding the actual pictures of Russia. Yeah. So when they go to Russia, it's all in the gray, sad filter. Everyone's kind of bummed out. People are hungry. There's a bread line. They don't have enough food, and people are standing in line waiting to get some food. And there are problems in Russia, obviously, but it's a little bit it's a Western-made movie, so it's a little bit played up. Like, Russia is sad, and communism causes everything to fall apart, and everything collapses, and nobody has no freedom, and they have no rights and no democracy. You probably know what I think about some of that, but it is not. Even people who are Russian and or left for whatever tendency must admit that there were mistakes made in the Soviet Union, and one of them was that there's I don't want to Monday morning quarterback the Soviet Union, but one of the reasons why it did fall apart was because the spirit of the spirit of creation, and the what is sometimes referred to as the spiritual vitality by Singaporeans like Kishore Mahbubani, who was in between East and West for a lot of the Cold War, and still in the new Cold War, unfortunately. But the spirit of like, we're building something, the spirit of excitement, and we're producing something, we're working on a project, right? And a lot of that is the camaraderie between people who are working on. And Alexei, as he points out in the movie Tetris, is alone. He's the only game programmer he's the only game maker in Russia, basically. There's no industry. He's alone. He's lonely, right? And he's saying, when Hank first comes to him, Hank's like, hey, I want to be your friend. Hey man, you made Tetris. That was an amazing game. I love that game so much. He's just like, he's kind of like, part of it is like, I think, I don't want to say that Hank is like naive. It's not necessarily that. He just has a very optimistic, moonshot, high-spirited, positive outlook, and a lack of. He has the audacity, as Holly pointed out. He does have the audacity. I mean, and he's also a dude of a particular heritage, and so he has that. He just like, but not in, but like in a way that's just like, I'm gonna just go up like past the secretary. I know that there's no meeting for the Nintendo head. I'm just gonna walk in and talk to him. You know, he walks into the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and he just walks into a government office with a tourist visa, but he's not a tourist. So he's lied to the Soviet, government, and he's walking in, and he's like asking for proprietary Soviet software, right? And so the government, like, I know part of it he does. He's not. I mean, he's not that naive to think that, oh, well, that's fine. He just like, but he does like take big, audacious, risky bets. That's what he does. But he also like genuinely wants. These are aspects of to. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but those are aspects of his personality. Like he does that all the time. Even in Hawaii, I've seen him do this stuff. It doesn't always work. That's part of the thing. He didn't work. His first endeavors when he was working pre the Nintendo, pre Tetris, it didn't work. But anyway, I'm getting off my topic. But sometimes it does. But that's the nature of making things. Sometimes it's not going to work, right? Like when you make a robot in a first Lego League competition in Hawaii. Sometimes you make a robot and you try a thing and then it doesn't work, and then you got to try. But it's kind of like, is the setting for what you're producing in based on some people wanting to control everyone else and dominate for their own benefit, or is everybody working right? And then there's competition. But when people are really not doing well, do they get a leg up? Like if you lose the Lego competition, you don't become homeless and starve, right? But in the U.S. occupation of Hawaii, unfortunately, if you don't, win at the capitalist business game, that's the way that it's played in the United States, especially nowadays, then that is the case. And how Holly and I have been homeless and deeply screwed at various times. So like, anyway, so long story short, back to the Russia. So in the Soviet Union, Sergei's game, he's alone there. He doesn't really, if he tries to sell the game, and I'm sorry, Alexei Pachitnov, not Sergei. If he was to try to sell Tetris, he made it on the Soviet computer technology and their servers. There's no really such thing as these private businesses. It would just be ended, right? So and Alexei said like he was looking, he in the end he's like, I just want people to be able to play the game and derive joy from it. And in the Soviet Union, apparently, I don't know if this is true. I gotta go look this up, but apparently he released the game. Everyone got to play it in the Soviet Union, right? Tetris. It was just using brackets. It was all coded like pre Windows. It was like pre Apple. There was no mouse and cursor. There was no graphics. It was just like brackets making the blocks, like green text on a black screen, like the Matrix style, right? Think of the raining, hiragana, katakana, and binary characters in the Matrix opening, right? Tetris was like that. It was just a bunch of it was a bunch of ASCII characters raining down. But everyone got access to it in Russia, and it was like they loved it so much that it was actually like hurting productivity. Like, you guys can't stop. You have to like ban Tetris in a lot of workplaces because people were playing too much Tetris when they should have supposed to be working, right? But again, on the one hand, it's like, oh, it's authoritarian and it's severe and it's tyrannical and draconian. On the other hand, like China limits TikTok to 40 minutes per day for children. They can, if you're under 18, you can only visit for certain sites. It pushes science and technology. China pushes through their. Still America's complaining about this, right? But China pushes Douyin to science and technology content and mathematics content to under 14-year-olds, right? And then adults, it's whatever, right? But it's kind of like some limitations. There's has to be like a balance there, which is that some limitations might actually be beneficial. And speaking of technology, software, apps, and new innovations, right? TikTok is one of those, and the United States is behind them now, right? Speaking of the spirit of excitement and production and fun and camaraderie and friendship, right? TikTok is connecting people. The United States is pushing everyone. Like, United States is very much in a position not unlike the Soviet Union in the 1980s now, right? But the United States at the 2020s is very close to, from a different angle, from the capitalist as opposed from the communist angle, is in the position that the Soviet Union was in the 1980s. The United States is there now, which is pushing, not necessarily, they're having difficulty trying to stop internal contradictions from trying to stop their own collapse by pushing people out, right? And start trying to stop the collapse that's happening. And a lot of that is failure to revitalize the people, the country, and everyone to get excited about something. People are, and in Tetris, right? There's scene in Tetris, right? Let me read. Where did I get this one? Yeah. So there's a scene in Tetris where Alexei goes to Alexei and Hank, the American and the Russian, go to a rave that's happening, or like a party happening, where they're listening to the final countdown. They're like, we want Coca-Cola, we want Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Look, he has Levi's jeans, right? That's a major plot point. Hank is an American in Russia in 1988, right, or in the 1980s, before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and he's got Levi's, and then this girl with like a punk haircut. They're listening to this Western music, right? I've also worked with Polish, Estonian. They're like, Estonia has declared independence. Soon is the end of the Cold War, and in Russia we will finally have McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Frito. If Mikhail Gorbachev can eat the Russian head can eat his Pizza Hut pizza. Anyways, and that's kind of like, I know it's not funny for a lot, because actually things didn't. It's not told the stories. Things actually didn't get that much better actually for a lot of people in Russia after, because unfortunately not everybody is Hank Rogers. Not everybody is a lot of average people in the United States who are not necessarily want to subdue and subjugate everyone else, but they're part of a bureaucracy with corporate and governmental characteristics and systemic interests that pushed, tried to privatize everything, gobble up all of the Russia's resources and intellectual property, and then put nuclear armed ICBMs as close to Russia and then right in Ukraine, right? Since that, that's where we are now. We're in the United States. The United States is not the United States as it's operating presently is not operating in a Hank Rogers style, the Hank Rogers kind of American fashion. It's operating in a more Elonian, a more Maxwell Western fashion, right? Oh, fun fact: the Maxwell, this character, right? The what's his name? Tetris Maxwell Senior. Let me see. Robert Maxwell is in fact the grandfather of Ghislaine Maxwell. And Robert Maxwell died under mysterious circumstances shortly after defrauding billions of dollars worth of people's pensions and retirements. But anyway, he's related to Ghislaine Maxwell. You might remember. You remember this person, yes, from the Epstein debacles. Anyways, so back to Sergey though. God damn it! I want to keep calling him Sergey. I'm sorry, I keep calling Alexei Sergey. I don't want to keep calling. Why do I keep? I knew other Russians that were named Sergey. I think that's part of why. Not Sergey Brin. I didn't work with him, but Sergey Brin is another Russian that helped innovate one of the most successful American tech companies, other than Hank Rogers' Tetris. What is his name of his company? What is it? His first video game was the Black Onyx, which he claims was the one of the first Japan's first major turn-based role-playing game, the Black Onyx. There might have been other, but it was like a officially sold and known game. Hank Rogers' father was a jeweler, and so that's part of why he called it Black Onyx. And I think apparently if you diehard fans of the game would actually, I think if you beat it or something, you would get you would get in the mail a actual Black Onyx. And that was marketing. I mean, back in the day, again, the game industry was very small. I mean, John Romero, another game legend that's also an indigenous person like myself that I've talked to and bring up all the time. John Romero, he had to make a game every month or every month at one point, and he just like mailed lots of copies out and tried to get them in magazines. It was the game industry was a different, smaller, weirder industry, I think, at that time. It's still weird, but anyways, back to the topic though, because I got to get out of here. I got to go talk to other game developers soon. So but there's a scene in Tetris where it's like, we in Russia, we want to have, this is one of the reasons why they collapsed, was because they, obviously it would be great if everyone didn't have to worry about, because in the communism, I think the idea is not necessarily a bad concept, right? Obviously, I wish that Hawaii would turn to these, socialist, anti-imperialist, universal healthcare having, etc. Hawaii that the 1800s had. I would not go back there, but like get back on that trajectory, as opposed to, a lot of the, the very unequal Hawaii that we have now, like a lot of the United States. And so like, but the communism, where nobody owns anything, right? So Sergey creates the game. It's owned by the entire, God damn it. So it's Alexei Pajitnov. I say his entire name. If Alexei Pajitnov creates the game, then everyone in the entire country owns it, basically. So it's everyone's collective property. And so then everyone produces, and then it's distributed equally. And obviously, like with things like housing, with things like healthcare, right? With things like, the thing is, there's like, I had another fellow YouTube content creator, Michael Saba, who does lots of really fun game videos and games, YouTube videos and video essays related to games. He worked in Russia, and he actually said, yeah, Russia is a lot like the United States in a lot of ways, except the Russia has universal healthcare. Like I can walk into a clinic or hospital anywhere. Even then, in the 2010s, I could walk anywhere into a clinic. I'm not even Russian, right? And I just walked in as an American, and they just treated me, and there's no money exchange. And so like there's a lot of really positive things about even now, right? And even East Germany had better healthcare. It had dental and vision, when West Germany during the Cold War didn't have those. And there's actually a lot of problems in West Germany that, now for the West, they don't want to play those up, because the whole West-East Germany thing is about making everything in the East look bad, And I also have, if you want to go off on my other takes on other topics in a more, from a different lens, and the East-West struggle, because I actually did, Tetris is a movie about an East-West Cold War, capitalist world versus communist world struggle, right? Or it's also Eurasian, right? Or the European and the Euro world, right? The Western world versus the Eastern world. And I recently made this video about Shadow and Bone, which is, on another topic. This is another me shouting my own videos out. Cyberpunk, Eurasian struggle and connecting the world island in Shadow and Bone. And that's still a struggle, But, part of the problem is that, like, it doesn't have to be war. It doesn't have to be fighting. It doesn't have to be that way, And there are actually like there's a lot of positive developments in East Germany that West Germany could have used. There are a lot of positive developments in the Soviet Union that, it's actually a lot of people have made the argument that I think is correct. All of the things that the Western world, the Euro world, like started, like the healthcare, even the New Deal in a large sense, which came after the revolution in Russia in the early 20th century. Then the New Deal came, and a lot of this, obviously there was work that had to be done organizing within the United States to get better benefits when the Maxwells were taking it all in the 1920s and the Roaring 20s, when the rich were taking everything and the poorest had nothing, and people were starving en masse in the Grapes of Wrath era. But also there was in the global sense, there was a Russian Revolution, and people and that was guiding the United States, right? Joseph Stalin was called Uncle Joe, during the 1940s, because there was kinship between the masses and the non-wealthy average people of the United States and Russia at certain points, right? And then there was the richest and most powerful entities, after a 94% tax rate and all of these benefits, systematically went about over the next, especially for the latter half of the 20th century, trying to eliminate and divide and go anything communist is the enemy of America. To be communist is to be anti-American, and so anti-communism. And I talk about that a lot, and that's the Cold War. But a lot of that is not necessarily about a natural inclination to people in the United States and in America and in the West generally to hate people who have, a furry hat and, live in colder, more, Arctic climates, right? Which is where a lot of, or, it is a constructed antagonism by the richest and most powerful elements, particularly in the United States and in the West, obviously. The U.S. is just the last standing Western, country. It was about fabricating more of that to maintain the injustice and to try to regain the power and the wealth that had been taken from the richest and the most powerful in Western plutocracies like the United States, right? In the 1930s and the 40s, right? And so, which is, in a sense, it's not a good thing, but it is one thing that it does say is that, like, the Cold War era, right, and the possibility of the East and West not being at war, right, needlessly, right, the possibility of the United States not sending tanks and missiles and guns and bombs and pushing far right elements and backing horrible Maxwell-like oligarchies, right, in Ukraine and in that region to foment war with Russia, war with the East, right? Russia is not even, it's not. They can't use they use the Cold War rhetoric, but Russia is not a communist country now. So, right? But it's still the anti-Easternness, and so it doesn't have to be that way. It could be more like, how can we learn and work together? How can, like, we economically work together? Like, but what is the United States doing? Blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? How does that further the warm friendship? That doesn't. It furthers a failed Cold War 2.0 attempt and mentality, right? It's kind of like, right? It's really, that's what's getting in the way. What do the average Americans? I think the average American now, they can see that the war is not being won. They can see that the Europeans and Americans more and more can see that the sanctions that they have been riled up into wanting to support to stop evil Russia, evil Russia, right? They can see now that the sanctions are backfiring, right? It's like, they're boomeranging, right? The U.S. is like throwing this, is throwing this boomerang at the Russians, thinking they're going to hit Putin and they're going to hit Russia, and then it's swinging back, and now nobody's using U.S. dollars. Dollar is collapsing. The sanctions, Russia is selling to China and India everything they used to sell to Europe, and now Europe is falling apart. And the European, just yesterday, the German left party was saying, we want the U.S. soldiers, U.S. bases, and U.S. nuclear weapons out of Germany. Right? Why are we antagonizing people that we should be friends with, that we should be doing business with? So I think actually in that sense, like, when it comes to, like, obviously I've made comments about James Bond, the good CIA aspects of Black Panther, and I have a lot to say about that. But, like, as John le Carre-esque, Tom Clancy-esque, Cold War, James Bondian spy thrillers go, which are a lot of times very much attacking the East, attacking Russia and China, and maintaining imperial hegemony. Tetris is more about, like, why do we have to? It's more about why don't we try to get more connected? Even Stranger Things season 3, I have a lot to say about that one. Because it's a little more one-sided, right? I feel like some of those cause more antagonism, but Tetris, there are some particular comments I was like, I don't know about that one. It's a very Western comment, but by the end of the movie, it's about, like, how can we work together? Like as the Chinese, as their party has recognized the failure of the Soviet Union, we cannot so strongly adhere to any these ideological purity. We cannot so strongly adhere to ideology to the point that we sacrifice economics and working, prioritizing relationships. This is part of how the Chinese have surpassed the United States, because they haven't been at war with anyone for decades. They don't attempt to engage in that, right? They have innovated. It's like 80 to 90% of all new white papers, like even by U.S. analytics and even the U.S. Department of Defense, acknowledge that the Chinese are leading in innovation. Tetris was an innovation in a time. It was a new technology, like quantum computing, like artificial intelligence, like hypersonics that the United States is failing at. Wait, why are they failing at that? Well, part of it is pushing too much money towards antagonistic, needless warfare, which used to work in an imperial colonial world, but we're not there anymore. It's making too many enemies. It's not taking lessons from the Soviet Union, which is you should try to provide for the basic needs of your masses so that they have the energy and the will and the want to, and the ability to even work. Because I tell you, as a millennial, I'm amazed that I finished Neofeud, right? There's lots of other millennial and Gen Z people who were raised who were adults in the noughties and in the teens, who were very, as I've already gone over this many times, very disgruntled and very upset with the so-called American dream, and then we're working full-time and can't afford basic living standards, have to choose between healthcare and eating, and right? And so the United States is kind of, again, it is like, in that sense, it is like failing to learn from that lesson in the Soviet Union, right? And without the people getting some basic amount of their material and economic needs met, and without some ability to like see some future in their country, Americans, they don't have a very good view of their future, right? All you see is this. I mean, I make dystopias, but I'm questioning like if I need to make more, because it's like, right, every way you wake up and there's another 7,000 trains have crashed. You wake up and like there's a new poisoned, multiple area codes of water supplies are gone. You wake up and there's like, another billionaire is like selling torture machines in the Torment Nexus, or there are no positive science fictional or movies about the future of America. There's only nostalgic looking back into the past, which is kind of how the Soviet Union was at the end, right? There was like looking back at, there's a scene in Tetris where you have the tanks, right? In Tetris, let me see the Tetris movie. There's a great scene where there's like Lenin, the picture of Lenin comes down, like Tetris movie, Moscow parade. Yeah, there's a scene in Tetris where there's a parade. And you see there's Lenin pictures. Everyone's marching. There's all the flags. The tanks are going. The howitzers are going. They're like, the great Soviet Union, the great USSR and Russia is immortal, and we will live forever. And then inside there's the KGB, the KGB guys, and then there's the bureaucrats that are all they can see that like the economics is falling apart. Everyone is kind of knifing. More people are trying to like, I'm going to get my $1 million so I can survive when Russia collapses, right? And the parade is going though, and everyone's like triumphalistically kind of like celebrating how great we are and we're immortal, and looking at the past and looking at what we did. And not to say that there were not great strides that were made and great successes in the history of the Soviet Union, but it's kind of like, but you're not like looking at like where you are honestly, and then going, how are we gonna move forward? Like, where the people are like, we would like to maybe do a little more innovation, but we don't have a system set up to do that. We would, maybe I would like some. I mean, I don't know. I can't say that having Coca-Cola, Levi's jeans, and a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figure, makes your life better. McDonald's not necessarily good, but it's kind of like, I would like some kind of hope for the future. I want to engage in something. I see other people having this and I don't have it, And so like there is like and part of it was like, some people, in like different countries who took a socialist path, like made decisions in a very, it's again, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback, because when you're in a world run by imperialist, capitalist, Western, hooligans, it's a gangsters, it's difficult, right? But it's kind of like, for whatever reason, like the spiritual the vitality of the people of the country was not moving forward. They were looking to the rest of the world for other ways, right? Like Gen Alpha and Gen Z kids on TikTok supporting China over their own country, because they're like, I want access to this really cool new stuff that they're doing in China, that they're making in China. They have TikTok, they have like high-speed rail, they have like amazing high-tech cities, they have like no homelessness in these cities, they have like, right, they have like the latest and the greatest in AI, they have the latest and the greatest in quantum tech, they have like all this new cool stuff. Why am I in America with our infrastructure dilapidated? I can't even eat, like I'm duct taping my arm because I got a cut. People are leaving the United States. People are giving up because the vitality of the United States, right? The promise of the United States, the and also like the mean-spiritedness of like, I want to get mine, and I don't care that it's collapsing. I want to take it all, and that is strangling all of what remains of faith in it. I mean, obviously the United States had pre-existing problems, but whatever it had been able to piece together in the 20th century, by the 2020s, it's a lot like, the United States is not like Russia, because it's totally different countries, totally different histories. But in the sense of a superpower, very large country, right? Suddenly unable to, reproduce itself, looking backwards, not innovating, falling behind, trying to attack everyone, right? When Russia's not attacking, but Russia is like trying to keep out, right? The Great Wall of Russia, trying to keep out the Americans that might be bringing some Coca-Cola in, might be coming and, innovate, wanting to bring Tetris to the world, right? That's part of the story. Some of them are like, this is bad. But some of the Russians realize, some of the Russians inside of Russia go, what's best for the Russian? No, I thought what was best for Russia is that we stay on this communist, no private property, no businesses of any kind outside of everything governed this way. And one of the Russians, like, who is like, maybe what we have to do is we have to figure out how we can do international business. The Russians, I remember Hank told this story where he said, like, when I went to the Soviet Union, they did interrogate me. But when they were interrogating me, because I'm just an American, lying up, I'm BSing about my tourist passport, and we're in a Cold War, so it's fully valid that they interrogate me. But while the Russian, while their KGB were interrogating me and asking me questions, and I told them, hey, this contract that you have with the Maxwells, they're ripping you off. And they said, what? And they said, yeah, they're not giving you royalties. And then the Russian said, what is the royalties? Because they didn't practice, they weren't practicing capitalism, right? And so he's like, well, that's like, when you sell a game, a percentage of the money from the sale goes back to you, right? And then the Russians figure out, okay, so then the Russians are like going back and forth with like they're learning how to deal with this international new reality, right? And so it's kind of like, and so what the Russian negotiator with Hank wants is actually the best for Russia, but it is like, it is a thing about realizing, well, maybe we have to like adjust. We have to adjust we have our pure, ideological book, like the book club. We have our pure thoughts and our, not to say that you should just give on all your ideals, but you have to adjust you have to adjust your theories to the reality. That's the theory and praxis aspect, right? And you can like kind of see that happening in the movie where it's like, well, I believed in this particular line of our Communist Party, but it's like, I think that we need to adjust more and faster to this reality, And obviously they didn't adjust fast enough, blah, blah. There's a lot. I don't want to like, just be like, oh, Russia failed because X, Y, and Z. But it's like, that is part of it, And so like, where China is not making those mistakes, right? And certainly not that they make no mistakes, but they're not making those mistakes, which is why they are, in the place that they are in the United States. And also there's historical trajectories, but the United States is in the place that it is in large part because it is, there's another United States that could have figured out maybe we should not, there's another United States that figured out maybe we should not screw over all of our 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds in the 2000s. Maybe we should put the criminals, right? Maybe we should take the Maxwells in the 0809 financial crisis, right? Let's like actually put them like in jail. Let's take their money. Let's like clean house in the United States, right? Through some Obama could have not crushed Occupy. Like let the people like push to like start in the direction of like undoing the uncontrolled plutocratic crooks running the United States, right? But the United States didn't get there. What the United States did was didn't imprison any bankers, no executives went to jail, only kept doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on its imperialist, capitalist, completely unregulated system of banking and corporate malfeasance and imperialism. It didn't try to make friends with the world. It just kept on pushing for more war and more war and more war and more war. Printed tens of trillions of dollars. And so the United States has made collectively mountains upon mountains of mountains of mistakes, and those mistakes are building into snowballing and building into a giant Himalaya worth of snow, and is crashing down now. And so that's that. But that's where. But that doesn't mean that it's the end for everything. But that means that like in this moment, people need to learn how to stop being in that mentality and start figuring out how they can work with their friends and not just the friends inside of their own countries, but internationally, right? International friendships, and that's where let's see, there's a picture, like in this video I was showing earlier, right? So the important thing about this video is you have an American who is also Indonesian and a Dutch passport holding, part Indonesian American who lives in Hawaii and is married to a Japanese woman, right? And then you have a Russian who worked with him to make a game that everyone in the world loves, right? And so it's like the United States has to figure out, I'm not saying you have to redo that, but I mean like the spirit where you are like working with the rest of the world to produce something of value, right? And then like produce, financial, as I said, fire sector, finance, insurance, real estate, they do not produce things of value. Those are extractive industries. So the U.S. cannot keep running on that. Producing weapons and war and bombs, and then producing IMF loans like they're doing to Ukraine right now, like they try to do to Africa. Africa is like, no, we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to just be extracted from. Those are not net productive. Those are net extractive. The military-industrial complex doesn't even produce enough artillery shells to fight Russia, even if they wanted to. But if they, the military-industrial complex, that is not net productive. That is net destructive, ultimately. Like, yes, in the near short term, you're producing a missile or a bomb or a gun or a tank or a F-16 or F-35 that then breaks. That's the joke about now. But you're producing something, but in the long run, you're not really producing anything. You're net destroying, because people's towns, lives, homes, countries, factories that could have been producing will not be producing after you blow them up. So this idea that you can go to places, right, with force and power and dominational tendencies, crush other places, take their stuff, and then live off of your gangster plundering, right? That's this 500 years of colonialism. That time is done, right? It should have been done, like it should have never happened, but it did. And America doesn't know how to get past that, because basically Europeans fell apart and they could only be America's vassal after World War II, right? When all the colonial plunderer powers fought and then destroyed each other and fell into ruin and burning cities like London and Paris. And I gotta go. And so the U.S. took over for that, but the U.S. has just taken the mantle of that, kind of put on a sunny face of, yeah, we're nice and we have democracy and freedom and human rights, and yeah, we have 57 flavors of ketchup, and here's a little bit of healthcare, and here's the New Deal. We're gonna let that happen, to save capitalism. But the United States never really changed its ways internationally. It's still wanted to dominate, beat up, and brutalize and produce net negative. It never really learned how to actually treat others as equals, as friends, and have win-win cooperative relationships. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is I gotta go because I gotta go have a indie game panel in a minute. Is ultimately that we have to, people in the United States and in the West generally have to learn how to get back on that track and end the new Cold Wars, have warm friendships with everybody. And oh man, I could talk about this forever. But yeah, it's one more little side tidbit. When Hank Rogers, when I was working for him with at Avatar Reality, it was one place that I worked for Hank. There was a giant Tetris sign there. I remember it, and he would come in and tell the story about the Russians staring, encountering the Russians, telling them, hey, you're getting ripped off by the other guy, doing them a favor, and the Russians ending up working with him when he taught them about royalty. So Frank actually was a friend to Russia in that sense. He just said, hey, I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to tell you, you guys are getting ripped off. So if you sell the Tetris to me, I'll actually give you royalties. It'll be a better deal for you. You don't, and Alexei and Hank are still friends to this day. And because he was a good friend, and they're still friends. And because a Russian and American being friends is not very common. You know what I'm saying? I want to say part of that is the Hawaiianness that, the Hawaiianness kind of counteracts some of the extra cowboyishness. But anyways, because Hank lives in Hawaii. But anyways, he's like, they did interrogate me, but I'll tell you what, in the movie, the difference is I never wore Levi jeans. I never had a pair of jeans. I mean, I believe that. I believe that. I mean, he usually showed up in he had slacks, but he usually showed up in flip flops. And sometimes just in t-shirt. He had Final Fantasy t-shirt, Black Onyx t-shirt, Nintendo t-shirt, Metallica t-shirt. I swear to God, I've seen Hank in Metallica t-shirt at least one time, just like John Romero. But anyways, but he said I never had a Levi jeans, and I was better at talking my way out of things. I would never get beaten up and have my pants stolen, because the Russians beat him up and steal his pants. That's part of the movie magic. Anyways, that's my last fun little tidbit of Tetris and Silver Spoon Games. Don't forget, everything we do here is supported by the sales of Neofeud, and help us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Neofeud. Neofeud is on sale. Speaking of games and making games and working on more games, help us keep on building international friendships by making more fun cyberpunk and adventure games like Neofeud, and support us here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative. That was first supported by the Hank Rogers founded innovation centers and initiatives in Oahu, Hawaii. So support us, keep on doing that as well. You can follow at Silver Spoon Guy. I'm just gonna do this real fast because everybody probably knows this already, but you can also follow at Silver Spoon Games for the game stuff, and you can follow Holly at the Tech Fairy. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Mastodon, etc. And thanks a lot for Holly for moderating. Thanks Victor and everyone else for showing up. Do check out Tetris. And holy shit, I'm late, so I gotta go. So until next time, keep